Not one, not two, not even three, but four possible tropical cyclones in the next 2 weeks? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Weather Center Nazario. Today I have quite a bit of new information to pass along, and I promise I'm not going to be nearly as long-winded as before. No more 15, 17, 20-minute videos, I promise you that much. I do want to make sure I communicate everything to the best of my ability, and I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Before we get started, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm going to be pumping out more content as we wander into the peak of hurricane season, so I want you to be tuned in for all of that. Now that we're done with the lovely intro, let's go ahead and fasten our seatbelts and jump right in. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so kicking things off, we are on NHC's homepage, just as always with every episode of Weather Center Nazario. At this time, as always, we are not expecting any tropical cyclone over the next 7 days. And here's why. As you can see, we still have an abundance of Saharan dust coming off the African coast. It's going to continue to push off to the west and the west-southwest, inhibiting a lot of our major thunderstorm and cyclonic development in the MDR. However, you can see just on this satellite image that we are seeing a bit of a weak moisture influx. So things are going to be changing here in the near-distant future, and I'm going to go forward in time to show you why. Next up, we're going to click over to something I don't typically pull up on here. This is going to be your potential anomaly chart for the Euro. Going forward in time, what I wanted to highlight, we're going to use my good old pen tool here. If you take a look down at this chart here, all these different values up here in the colors are going to indicate favorable and non-favorable conditions for tropical development in our Atlantic basin. Anything you see here, let me go ahead and erase my ink real quick. Pardon me in advance, folks. I'm also dealing with a little bit of a scratchy throat, so if I stutter or sound a little ahem, I apologize. But these blue colors right here, especially the darker blue colors, this is indicative of some pretty good upward vertical motion in our Atlantic region, which is very, very conducive for cyclone development and overall convective development. And as you can see here, if you correlate it down with our chart down at the bottom, or our key, if you will, this is all through the main development region. So a large chunk from August 13th, this Sunday, all the way up until potentially the 23rd to even the 24th, 25th of this month, we're going to be in an incredibly favorable environment for tropical development. I wanted to point this out because this is very interesting. Going forward, this is going to play a critical role in what we possibly see next. Switching on over to weathermodels.com, we're going to look at what the Saharan dust is currently doing. I thought this NASA GOES 5 aerosol model was very interesting today. We'll go out 120 hours right from the gate, and you can see a huge transformation in the amount of Saharan dust out there. This model initializes very well with what we saw. Let's go forward in time. This is a little early. This would be... It is 5:33 in the afternoon right now upon shooting this video, so this is about where we are current time. And as you can see, this dust plume right here, coming off the African coast, you probably can't see my pen tool right now, but all this dust getting ready to dump itself into the Atlantic initializes very well with our Saharan dust map, as we saw earlier. This is all that deep red, the white stuff. This is what you really don't want to see if we're trying to develop a tropical system. All this in here is showing very, very dense dry air, and this is just going to continue to funnel in thanks to our Bermuda high pressure out here driving the winds westerly off the coast and into the Atlantic basin. This is going to be changing very quickly, though. Let me go forward in time a little bit forward. Clear the ink. Let's go forward in time here. As you can see, as we go through the 14th into the 15th, we get a thin, wispy band of Saharan dust. Yes, there's still quite a bit of dust working its way into the Caribbean past the initial Caribbean islands, but what gets even more interesting as we continue on, you can see that despite the continuous stream ongoing, it really begins to thin out. And I want you to pay close attention to something right in through here. Let me go ahead and switch to a better color. Right in through this area, passing through this channel of dust. As I go forward, watch the little vortice that even this model wants to develop. Take a look at that. You even see a bit of a center of circulation right in through here that wants to identify something spinning with very little remnants of Saharan dust in it. But overall, guys, if you look at the big picture Atlantic, there is very little dust for these systems to do battle with, which is why I think all of us are sounding the alarm that this high-intensity activity we were anticipating, that everyone's been updating their tropical forecast for the remainder of 2023, I think we're just starting to see the fireworks begin to, I won't say kick off, but we're definitely posturing. The system, or the Atlantic, is posturing. This is what we're kind of monitoring. I'm going to go forward in time. We're on weathernerds.org. I'll go to the 240-hour mark, give you all the ensemble plots. There we go. As you can see, there is quite a bit of model agreement that something is going to develop in the main development region as we start to see the wave train coming off of Africa. I do believe that's going to begin, guys. We haven't seen it up to this point just yet, but typically climatology tells us that June, July, we don't see the freight train of waves begin to develop just yet. It is August 11th. We're getting close to the beginning of the peak window of hurricane season, so we anticipate we're going to start seeing more of these guys kicking off the coast and moving west, northwest, especially as our high pressure continues to orient itself over the mid-Atlantic Ocean. This is what we're keeping an eye on. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different color so you can see it. There is a bit of a model spread here. This would indicate that we have more of a weak Azores high back building off to the east. Some of the models want to track a storm, if it does develop, off to the west-northwest, kind of into a bad area, very reminiscent of what we have in terms of tropical weather out there right now over the central eastern Bahamas. So we're keeping an eye on things. As conditions become a little bit more favorable, we are anticipating these waves are going to get a bit more aggressive. This is taking a look at the GFS. Let me go ahead and load this up as well. We'll go all the way to the end of this loop, update plot, and not nearly as crazy looking as the Euro, which is quite interesting since GFS has been the more aggro of all model platforms. Up to this point, it's kind of done the little switcheroo on us as of most recently. But regardless, there is some activity potentially stemming in the Atlantic, and here's why. We're going to switch over to our infrared. This is North Africa. I'm really enjoying this drawing tool, I'm not going to lie to you guys. So we're going to do a little bit more doodling on here. I'm going to outline for you the northern portion of Africa this way, because I know this model, or not this model, but this infrared satellite can be a little difficult to see. Now I'm going to erase that, and this is what we're watching. We have one wave here at the end of the loop, and another one back behind it. This is that freight train that I kind of alluded to just a couple minutes ago. We're starting to see them begin to exit the coast, and conditions are going to begin to look a little bit more favorable for them sticking together and getting a little bit of spin going on. Alright, as I promised, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time in this video. I just wanted to give you a careful update. 12 Zulu European model. I'm looking at 500 millibar vorticity right now, spinning the atmosphere. This is going to help us to identify the multitude of systems that we're anticipating coming off of the African coast. I'm going forward in time, and guys, if you're looking over in that main development region, I'm going to bust out my handy-dandy doodling tool once again. We have rotation here, we have rotation here, rotation here. We have another one getting ready to come off of Africa. You can make a case that there's some rotation here. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the middle of August, or I should say approaching the middle of August. This is going to be a little bit more common, despite those of you thinking El Nino is going to smother all activity. When I mention activity, I'm not talking major cataclysmic hurricanes, but we are going to see some swirling out there, okay? Let me go back to the model. We'll go forward in time. Get to the back end of the model. There's been a lot of inconsistency in the Euro. Yes, there has been consistency in terms of something forming. Where it goes is all over the place. In fact, I argue that the Canadian model has been a bit more consistent out of all of our congruent model platforms in indicating something forming and traveling in the same general direction. I'll switch gears over to that right now. This is Canadian model. Switch over to the North Atlantic. I apologize. I should have had that pulled up already. We'll go forward in time, make sure we have MSLP on, and I'm going to jump straight ahead. Boom, there we go. Going to bring my drawing tool out one more time, guys. We have a double barrel low situation out there. And if you look a little more further downstream, there's a tropical wave moving just to the north of Puerto Rico at this point in time in the loop. We go forward once again, and you can see that we keep a good Bermuda high situated over the mid-Atlantic, driving these systems off to the west. And what is very interesting, as I mentioned in the introduction of this video, I'm going to bring my drawing tool out one last time. Take a look at this 1008 millibar low that's showing itself in the Gulf of Mexico. Folks, it is wildly favorable. I'm not going to say it's marginally favorable or modestly favorable. It is immensely favorable for tropical development in the Gulf of Mexico. So if this holds together like the GFS is also indicating, I'll go to the end of this loop. As the GFS is indicating that we could get a circulation to form up in the Gulf of Mexico, you guys in Louisiana, Texas, you might want to watch out, because it's showing a landfall along the Texas-Louisiana border. Looking a little weak right now. That could be a nice little tropical depression, maybe a weak tropical storm wandering in there over eastern Texas, but nonetheless, this is something that's showing up not only in the operational runs, but in our ensembles as well. We'll go over to the very end of the GFS, actually, because I wanted to talk about that fourth entity that our models are pinging on. None of our other models go as far out as the GFS, but still it's worth keeping an eye on because it's been on 2 different runs now, and it has shown signs of potentially strengthening. I'll also show you the ensembles before we get close to cutting the video, but ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this. We have a bit of a low-pressure center beginning to make its way over eastern Cuba, potentially over southern Florida before it wraps around the Gulf Stream waters and begins to deepen into our next tropical system. This is in the very tail end of the GFS run from about 300 hours forward. So as always, as I like to put it, we're in la-la land for the GFS now. So take this with a grain of salt, that infamous phrase for all tropical forecasters. But I'm going to transition to the Canadian ensembles as well and show you something that's pretty interesting. Go over to ensemble member mean sea level pressure. Ensemble members is essentially all the different runs of the Canadian model that could depict a certain forecast or a certain end result. And as you kick out over to the end of our loop, I'm looking at this area right here, bringing out the drawing tool again. I promise this is going to be one of the last times, but look at all this ensemble agreement. That is a large pocket, a huge pocket of agreement that something's going to form up and push off in a multitude of directions. But look at all that ensemble agreement. Let me get my ink out of the way. That is incredible. So all the models are lighting up, even the icon. The icon, this is the 18Z. We're only going to go out several hours. We're not going to go too far into time. I'm going to show you just the main development region. We'll go forward. This is the full 18Z run, and you can see that we start to see a circulation unveil itself out there as conditions become a bit more conducive and we get some of that dust to finally clear out. Shear isn't going to be an issue. Dry air is not going to be much of an issue anymore, so we are going to see these circulations hold together, and the models are doing a great job of showing just how much precip they're going to finally be able to hold on to. Moisture is not going to be an issue over the next few weeks and all through September. September is probably going to be the main event. If I had to put money down, September is going to be the main event. Taking a quick glance at those 2 variables, folks, this is going to be your dry air, or I should say your moisture, relative humidity, and upper levels of the atmosphere. Let's go forward. You can see that the European model also wants to diminish some of that dry air. It becomes a lot scarcer. We do still have some embedded pockets of dense dry air, but for all intents and purposes, we're seeing a lot less out there. It's more scattered about the whole Atlantic region altogether as opposed to being very concentrated, smothering all of our systems as they come off the coast. Same thing with the wind shear. Wind shear is looking fairly died down once this page decides to load, and then we'll begin to close out this video. Okay, anyways, take my word for it, shear is starting to diminish as well. I can probably pull up our analysis as of right now. There it is. It's kind of unresponsive. Let's go to our shear page. Oh, nope, there it goes. Okay, so we'll go forward in time. I'm going to fast forward to the end of the loop, and you can kind of see as we go through time, main development region isn't really seeing a whole lot in the way of shear. Some shear coming off of Africa, but there's also a lot of anticyclones in the upper levels indicative of that diffluence associated with our waves trying to develop some self-sustainment with themselves. You can see here we have a lot of upward vertical motion over our low stamped out here as well. So don't be misled. This is not truly indicating that there's going to be an abundance of upper level shear destroying these systems. There's going to be a mixed approach. Not only are these systems going to produce their own shear if they get some of that vertical velocity going on, but there's also some mixing of the long wave pattern. This area right in through here is definitely going to be a lot more shear. So this is going to play a role in whether or not these systems finally get their act together. This is towards the 2nd and 3rd week, or I should say 3rd and 4th week of August. So anything's possible at this point. And with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up episode 3 of Weather Center Nazario. Thank you all for tuning in today. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more updates on upcoming videos. As we wander into the peak of hurricane season and the weather begins to show up a little bit more intensely, I want to start to produce these videos at a much quicker rate. I promise you guys that. But once again, thanks for tuning in. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.